All right. This is a little bit of an eclectic sermon. Of course, we didn't do this morning. We didn't go through or read through the Bible. We finished up Deuteronomy. We've begun reading through the book of Joshua. Next week, on Sunday morning, we will talk about the main theme of the book of Joshua, which is the phrase, be strong and courageous. We'll talk about that in the book of Joshua next week, next Sunday morning. More of a practical application for us as we're reading through the book of Joshua. But tonight I want to go over, first of all, we're going to talk about the geography and the conquest of Canaan as they go into the land. And then if we have time, we'll see how it goes. We'll talk about an unusual part of the entrance into the land of Canaan. We'll see how the time goes. I did make, some people talked about or asked about, I had put out a chart on the land allotment in Israel that was a little bit hard to read, so I made a color version of it, which is easier for you to read because it's easier to tell which tribe got which part of the land. So I did make that for you if you want the land allotment chart that is colorized. And then I also have, as we're entering the book of Judges, I also have a timeline of early Israel that you can't see them in front of them. They're back here, but it looks like this. Timeline of early Israel that goes from the Exodus through the first kings, Saul and David, until the beginning of the temple construction in 967. So if you're interested in that timeline of the Judges, it's kind of interesting. We'll be talking about that, not this Sunday, but I believe next Sunday we'll get into the Judges story as we're really moving at a good pace through the Bible, through the story of the Bible in the Old Testament. Today I want to talk about some of the geography of Israel and especially the conquest of Canaan as they go into the land. I want to start with what is my favorite chart or favorite map of Israel. I've shown this before. I made it a little clearer. This is Israel. That's the size of Israel. You can see Tulsa on the map, just south of the Sea of Galilee. We're at the Sea of Galilee, way up here. That's Bartlesville. And this is the land allotment, the original land allotment, roughly. At this scale, you can't be really granular. But Israel is just not that big. It's just not that big, relatively speaking. When we're thinking about later on, we think about the Babylonian Empire, we think about the Roman Empire in the New Testament. Empires that dwarf, by orders of magnitude, the land of Israel. To go really across the land of Israel altogether is the distance from the Sea of Galilee down to the southern tip where Philistia is about the trip from Bartlesville to Oklahoma City. Now, of course, we understand they didn't have cars, so it took way longer. Obviously, if you have a car, you can do that pretty fast. But just thinking about the land and several verses that talk about when they're over on, from your direction, it's over here, the eastern side. When they're on the eastern side and they're up on the hill, like Moses when he's on the mountain before he's about to go in the land, and God tells him, look out at the land, look out over what you're going to go into. He can see a good portion of Israel. Especially if the mountain's high enough, you can just see a good portion of it, especially as it slopes down toward the sea, toward the Mediterranean Sea. Again, it's not like we're talking about a country the size of America. This is not even close. This is part of the state of Oklahoma. Just to give you a perspective as we're talking about, remember, they're doing all of this on foot. They're walking to the land of Canaan from Egypt. On this map, Egypt is like right here. And then, of course, they go down over here, and then they come back up. So they're walking, doing all of this walking, and it was read in our reading this week. I think it was this week. In Deuteronomy, maybe it was last week in Deuteronomy, Moses reminded them in the 40 years of wandering, your clothes did not wear out, your sandals did not wear out all the time you were wandering in the wilderness. It just must have been so exhausting. Can you think about that, just wandering around between Oklahoma City and, actually it would have been where Chickasaw Nation is down there. This is where they would have done their wandering, is down here. And they just would have wandered around there for 40 years, just around and around and around and around for 40 years. And then now we're coming into the book of Joshua. Moses has died, and they get to go into the land of Canaan. I have a series of maps here as we talk about this. Joshua 1 through 9 is the crossing of the Jordan. The story of the crossing of the Jordan. We're not going to read all of this, but God's commission to Joshua in chapter 1, and then we have the story of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2. And then Israel crosses the Jordan in chapter 3, sort of a mini version of the crossing of the Red Sea. The priests step into the water, and when the priests step into the water with the Ark of the Covenant, the waters pile up north of where they're crossing, and the waters pile up there, and they get to cross on dry ground, and then they build that altar. And then they go to the camp at Gilgal, and they are about to enter into the promised land and conquer Jericho. So they go to Jericho. They have, of course, the story with Rahab and the spies. And they walk around Jericho a bunch, 6 times, and then 7 on the last day. Walls fall down. Again, one of the main themes of the book of Joshua, we'll talk about this next week, but one of the main themes of Joshua, Israel's not winning, God is winning. Israel's not conquering the land, God is giving them the land. The language of giving, it's a gift that God is giving to them. They're basically doing nothing. Then we have the story of Ai. They go to Bethel in chapter 7, and they're about to keep going, and we're going to win, we're going to conquer, we're going to take the land of promise, and they go to Ai, and they lose. They lose the battle at Ai because some of the holy things, the things devoted to destruction, have been taken. Some of the things that they shouldn't have taken from Jericho are taken by Achan, and he has that sin, and they're defeated at Ai. And Joshua has to basically, God says, round up all the Israelites, and we'll do it by lot. By lot is the right tribe, and then the clan, and then the family, and then Achan is the one who has taken the things that he should not have taken. They destroy Achan and his family. And people think, well, that's kind of harsh. How many people died in the first battle of Ai? How many Israelites lost their families in that first battle because of the sin of Achan? So his family is destroyed, and they do conquer the city of Ai. And then chapter 9, the Gibeonite deception, where the Gibeonites, they figured out, like Rahab. I'm kind of surprised more people didn't try to do what Rahab and the Gibeonites did. Rahab, of course, the story of Rahab, the spies come, and Rahab's like, yeah, we've heard that you're coming. You killed Og, you killed Bashan. Hey, why don't you save me? I will help you, and you save me. The Gibeonites, similarly, the Gibeonites are like, yeah, we'll pretend that we're from far away, and we'll messy up our clothes, and we'll wear out our water skins, and we'll pretend that we're far away, and we'll make a covenant with Israel, because obviously nobody's going to stop the Israelites. So, hey, make a covenant with us. They do, and Joshua does honor the covenant that they're tricked into. And that's the first phase of crossing the Jordan. Chapter 10, we have the Battle of Ai. The Battle of the Gibeonites, where the sun stands still, and that leads us into the southern campaign. I think that's readable, right? That's readable. Oh man, that's readable. You can see Israel's movement in the red and the enemies in blue. The Israelites go to Gibeon, where, of course, the Gibeonites are attacked. You can see here Jerusalem, Jarmuth. Now, you see a lot of these question marks. You're like, what are you doing question marks? Guess what? Israel destroyed them. It's hard for us to figure out where they are because Israel destroyed all of them. But this is our best guess for where a lot of these places are. The king of Jerusalem, he's like, oh man, the Israelites are coming. So the king of Jerusalem, he gets a bunch of people together. We'll all meet up, and we'll go attack the Gibeonites, and we'll go try to prevent the Israelites from coming into the land. And the Gibeonites are like, oh, come save us. And so the Israelites come, and there's this battle here in Joshua 10, 6 through 15. And then they come down, and they end up destroying all of these cities. Gezer ends up going and helping Lachish when they get there. But this is Joshua 10. All of chapter 10 is basically they protect the Gibeonites, and then they carry south and destroy a bunch of cities, and they take over the land in the south. And that's basically most of chapter 10. Actually, all of chapter 10. They chase them to Makkedah. They hide out, the kings hide out in a cave, and the Israelites go get them. And then they keep going in their conquest. And then chapter 11 is the northern campaign in Israel. One of the things I wanted to note about these maps, over here, you can see where we're zooming in. So Israel's crossing the Jordan here. and then they do all this stuff. And then the southern campaign takes place in mostly this area. And then the northern campaign, they go way north. Now, one of the things we should note, there's not a lot of chronology given to us in Joshua. It's just they did this thing, and then they did this thing, and then they did this thing, and then they divvied out the land. And then Joshua chapter 23, towards the end of the book of Joshua, all it says is a long time afterward when the Lord had given them rest. That's it. That's all we get to know. So you can infer that a lot of this is taking, even though it doesn't take very long in the text, that is, it doesn't take much text to say, remember, they're having to walk everywhere. They are walking everywhere. They don't have chariots. They don't have horses. They don't have mounted cavalry. They are walking to all of these places, having these pitched battles, and then they're walking and chasing and running and chasing. So even though in the text it's very condensed, the conquest of southern Canaan from chapter 10, verse 29 to 43, and then chapter 11 is the conquest of northern Canaan, basically one chapter. Even though this is just one chapter in the text and the bulk of Joshua is about the land division, which we'll talk about in a minute, this is probably happening over a fairly long period of time. This is not some quick thing. It's not something that they're just doing in a weekend. This is something that's probably taking quite a bit of time. So chapter 11 is the northern campaign. As in chapter 10, the king of Hazor, he's like, oh, we got to get a coalition together. We got to get some kings together. We got to fight off these Israelites. And so he gets a bunch of people from down here to come up to Hazor. We're going to have a big battle. And God tells Joshua, don't be afraid of these people. I know he's gathered this big army. Don't be afraid of them. You're going to go up there. You're going to whoop them. You're going to destroy them utterly. So Joshua goes up, and he does destroy them utterly at Merom. There's this big battle at the waters of Merom. And then he goes up and chases them. The text in Joshua 11, 8, and 9, he chases them to Sidon, which is off the map. It's way up there. And then he chases them over to Mizpah, which I'm doing it wrong. Mizpah's that way for you guys. He chases them over to Mizpah, which is also off the map. And he chases them, runs them down, destroys them all, and then circles back around to come to Hazor and destroys Hazor, and then goes down and destroys the rest of those cities as well. And it's just a lot of marching and fighting and marching and fighting. And then chapter 12 gives us a nice summary. In Joshua chapter 12, the kings defeated by Moses, that is the kings, remember, over here. Moses defeated kings over here on the eastern side of the Jordan. And then the kings defeated by Joshua on the western side of the Jordan in chapter 12. And then chapter 13, there's still some land to be conquered. Now, you may not remember. God told the people when he brought them out of Egypt several times in the Pentateuch, and then in Deuteronomy repeated as they're about to go into the land of Canaan. One of the things that God told them, I will not let you destroy all of them immediately. This is going to be a prolonged period. And if you remember why, God says, I don't want the wild beasts to become too much for you. I don't want to drive all of the people out of the land so quickly that nature takes over too fast. We need to have this be a measured campaign. And one of the reasons I think these campaigns take a while is that promise of God. That you're going to go into the land of Canaan. It's not going to be immediate. I don't want nature to take over. And then you have to contend with nature that rises up in the wake of all this mass destruction. This is going to be something that we do progressively over time, which is why God says in Joshua chapter 23, a long time afterward when God had given them rest, when Joshua had given them rest. This is something that took a while to do, as God had told them it would take a while to do. So Joshua chapter 13, there's still land to be conquered, and it lists that land there. And then in Joshua chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, we're not going to read it, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, it is the land allotment. Now, this map's not going to be very easy to read. Just is what it is. The text is too small. There's nothing I can do about that because there's just so much information. That is what's on the screen is this map. So you can find it in the back over there if you want a copy afterwards. But this map is what's up there. This is the land allotment. A couple of notes about the land allotment in Israel in Joshua 12 through 20. Number one, of course, is the Jordan, the main barrier in Israel. And we have Reuben, Gad, actually it's over here for you, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. You'll see that grouping a lot in the lists of Israelite tribes. Reuben, Gad, the half-tribe of Manasseh. The reason they are grouped together all the time is because they're the ones on the eastern side of the Jordan, right? There's the Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And then there's the half-tribe of Manasseh and the rest of them over on the western side of the Jordan. There were several incidents. We talked about this in our Bible class. When was that? I don't know. 2 months ago, maybe? Month and a half ago. You can go back and find it, and if you want to listen to the audio. We talked about Joshua chapter 22, which I typically call the almost war in Joshua chapter 22, where the eastern tribes set up an altar, and there's a little bit of a worry or a conflict. The Israelites on the western tribes, they're like, we got to get ready for war. We got to go kill all these people. But fortunately, they talk first. And there's a little bit of a confusion between the eastern and the western tribes. That happened several times over the Israelite history. I don't know what it is about people. I don't know what it is about us as a species. We want to naturally, I don't know what it is about us, but we naturally want to do us and them. We naturally, whatever situation you find yourself in, this could be politics, this could be at work, this could be in your family, this could be friend groups, whatever it is. We naturally sort ourselves into us and them. And it happened to the Israelites too. The us and them, the eastern tribes and the western tribes. And we really have to fight hard against that. We have to fight so hard against that natural tendency to divide. God wanted the people to be unified. And so there was a lot of instruction in there. In Joshua, there's a lot of instruction about how to make sure that the western and eastern tribes do not get divided. That was part of the main reason why the fighting men of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, the fighting men had to go over and help the rest of the people conquer the land. Because it's us. It's all us. It's not eastern and western. It's all Israel. The land masses aren't particularly equal. You'll notice that. They just are not equal. It is what it is. Like, by land mass, they're not equal. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is different kinds of land. Not all land is equally valuable, right? You have pasture land, you have farmland, you have just desert. There's parts of Israel that are just desert. So you have different kinds of land for different tribes based on not just the amount of land, but the kind of land that it is and the value that it has. And then, of course, you have different numbers of people. Numbers 26:52, we're not going to read that. Actually, let's read it. Numbers 26:52. We might as well read it. Numbers 26, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Among these the land shall be divided for inheritance according to the number of names. To a large tribe you shall give a large inheritance, and to a small tribe you shall give a small inheritance. Every tribe shall be given its inheritance in proportion to its list. But the land shall be divided by lot, according to the names of the tribes of their fathers shall they inherit. The inheritance shall be divided according to lot between the larger and the smaller. Now, one of the things that's interesting about Israel, we're not going to talk about this at length, a lot of things that Israel did by lot. That is, by lot is random chance. You can do it a number of different ways, but you're basically creating a scenario where random chance is the determiner. But the Israelites understood, guess who is going to determine the outcome? Well, it was going to be God who did that. The chance element removed manipulation on the part of the humans who were doing it. So you could roll dice. You could do it by picking long and short straws. You could do it by different colored rocks. But the point was to remove human control, remove human manipulation of the outcome, and allow God to have control of the outcome. That's why they did it by lot, so God would be in control. So the land masses are not equal, obviously. Some of the land is better, and of course some of the people had more people in their tribe. And this was something that mattered for Israel for a long time. This was something that they thought about a lot, and they had thought about the land inheritance even before they got into the land of Israel. Numbers chapter 36, verse 5, Moses commanded the people of Israel according to the word of the Lord, saying, the tribe of the people of Joseph is right. This is what the Lord commands concerning these two daughters that they didn't have anybody in their tribe that was going to have the land. They were going to marry out. If they were going to marry outside the tribe, well, what would happen to the land? So what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, let them marry whom they think best, only they shall marry within the clan of the tribe of their father. The inheritance of the people of Israel shall not be transferred from one tribe to another. For every one of the people of Israel shall hold on to the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers, and every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the people of Israel shall be wife to one of the clan of the tribe of her father, so that every one of the people of Israel may possess the inheritance of his fathers. So no inheritance shall be transferred from one tribe to another, for each of the tribes of the people of Israel shall hold on to its own inheritance. Now, remember, we're looking at multiple millions of people by this point. And if you go through the lists in Numbers, the census records in Numbers, we're at tens, hundreds of thousands in the tribes. It's not like if you have to marry within the tribe, this is really narrowing down your pool of potential spouses, right? We're still talking about 50,000 people, tens of thousands of people. But the point is this: God had the land promise. He organized the allotment of the land. He told them where the allotment would be. And God didn't want that changing over time. God wanted that to stay in the tribes. The tribes had their inheritance based on the word of the Lord, and that was going to be the way that it was going to be. That is a brief summary. I want to remind you, as you think about and you're reading through your own, as you're reading through the story of Joshua this week, I will remind you again, this map exists if you want it. The timeline of Israel exists if you want it. I did not make copies of these. But I will, if you want copies of these, I will make you a copy if you want a copy of these campaigns. But in the time that we have left, I want to consider a strange subplot of conquering the land. Now, this is something I want to talk about because people have asked me about, but I didn't really have a good place for it. And it doesn't really warrant its own sermon time. But I do want to talk about it briefly because it's interesting. As you work backward and you're thinking about the conquering of the land, and I do promise you're like, why are we talking about this? There will be a point, and I promise that we'll get there. Working backwards in the story of Joshua, really all the way back to Genesis, you find a couple of different words that are particularly interesting. Joshua 11, verse 21. This is after, again, we have the southern and the northern campaigns, and they've had a lot of victories. They haven't conquered all the land yet, but they've had a lot of victories. Joshua came at that time and cut off the Anakim, from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua devoted them to destruction with their cities. There were none of the Anakim left in the land of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some people remain. Those words might be familiar to you. I'll go back here. That is from the land of the Philistines. The land of the Philistines is over here on the coast, the Mediterranean coast. The Philistines, of course, will be a thorn in the side of the Israelites for many centuries to come. They will continue to be a thorn in the side because, as we'll read when we get to Joshua, the Israelites do not destroy everybody. They sort of settle down. And they don't do what God wanted them to do and destroy all of the people. So it's not just the Philistines. The Philistines are a major source of animosity and aggression and conflict for Israel. But I'll remind you, they're over here on the eastern side, or western side, on the Mediterranean. So Joshua drives out all the Anakim, basically back down to Philistia on the coast. Deuteronomy 2, 10 and 11, this is on the eastern side of the Jordan. The Emim formerly lived there, a people great and many, as tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also counted as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. Just different names here. Anakim, Rephaim, the Moabites have a special name for them. Numbers 13:32, again, we're working backwards here. This is the spies. They go into the land of Canaan. They go up from the south into the land of Canaan to spy out the land. And they come back and they say, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw there are of great height. And we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them. these three words are transliterations: Anakim, Rephaim, Nephilim. They are not translations. You know I hate translations, guys. I've said this enough so many times. These are all transliterations where you just take the sounds of the Hebrew word and you just make a new English word. But they all have to do with stature or constitution or physical prowess in some way. In Genesis 6, 1 through 4, which is the first time we see Nephilim, in a discussion of the mighty men, the word Nephilim literally means a feller, one who pushes down or cuts down or pushes over, one who fells. That's what Nephilim means. The Rephaim are the invigorated ones, or they're really healthy, they're really energetic, they have a lot of physical constitution. And then the Anakim, literally long-necked. They're tall. They're tall people, which we understand that. We've read several of those things already. Deuteronomy 2, verse 20, the Rephaim formerly lived there, but the Ammonites call them Zemzumim. I think I said that right. A people great and many and as tall as the Anakim, but the Lord destroyed them from before the Ammonites. Deuteronomy 3, 10 and 11. Og, the king of Bashan, you remember Og? That was one of the kings that Moses defeated over on the eastern side. Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits is its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubits. These people, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, and the Anakim, they were very big, very tall, very mighty. They were just giant people. They were huge. And of course, this all the way goes back to, if you remember, in Numbers 13, there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. That goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. They took as their wives any they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit will not abide in man forever. He is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. This is when God kind of gets fed up with creation. Not kind of. He does get fed up. He gets fed up with what's going on. We're resetting the ages. We're going to kill everybody. We're going to start over. I don't like what you guys are doing. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. There's 2 ways to interpret this passage, and really you can pick whichever you want here. I don't feel particularly strongly either way. The one way of thinking about this is the sons of God were simply especially mighty, tall men who were rulers. That's one way of thinking about it. The Anakim, they encounter the Anakim when they go into the land of Canaan, who are some of the Nephilim. That's what they say in Numbers chapter 13. The Anakim are the Nephilim, these tall, especially tall people. Maybe they were just especially tall people who were mighty rulers. They were mighty men. They had a lot of physical prowess. The other alternative is that sons of God are angels here. This is what's, I think, more popular, especially in Hollywood and or pop Christianity, is that these sons of God were angels. We're not going to read this, but you can see Job 1:6, where it talks about the sons of God who go in to give reports to God. We will read Jude chapter 6. Jude verse 6 we will read, in 2 Peter 2:4. Jude 6, of course there's only one chapter in Jude. Jude 6, we should go back to verse 5. I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. Of course, what is he referring to? He's referring to those who went into the land to spy it out, and they came back, oh, the Anakim are too big, we can't do it anymore. And he says, what does Jude say? Jesus destroyed them. They didn't get to enter the rest. We'll talk about that in Hebrews. And the angels who did not stay within their position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains of gloomy darkness until the judgment of that great day. When we think about the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6, it's possible that that's what Jude is referring to. The angels who did not stay within their position of authority, where they should have stayed, but they came down to the earth and went into the daughters of man. 2 Peter 2:4. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. And again, it's hard to say what does this mean. if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. And then he goes to Sodom and Gomorrah, and then he goes to Sodom and Gomorrah and talks about Lot. Peter seems to be going in chronological order here. Well, the angels, when they sinned, God did not spare them. When did that happen? Presumably in the list in 2 Peter before the flood, which could be this. The question then becomes this, okay? We have the Nephilim, whatever you want to put there. Maybe it's just weirdly genetically tall people. Maybe it's these sort of scions of the angelic sinners. How did they survive the flood? Because after Genesis chapter 6, of course, everybody's dead. They're all dead except for Noah and his family. That's it. So the Anakim, who come from the Nephilim are on the earth in those days, that is the days before the flood. But Genesis chapter 6 says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, also after the flood. Well, how did they survive the flood? There's really only 2 options. Either and this goes way down the rabbit hole, it doesn't matter, pick whatever you want. Either there's some sort of latent, dormant genetic variation that's introduced that somebody in Noah's family had. Somebody in Noah must have been carrying it if it's a genetic variation, because Noah's family's it. They're the only ones that survived the flood. So if this is introduced after the flood, they appear in the land of Israel, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, and the Anakim, these great tall individuals. If it's some sort of generic variation, it had to have been carried by Noah's family. Just had to have been. That had to have been the case. The alternative is that the angels did this again after the flood. So God wipes out everybody on earth. There's a flood. There's repopulation out of Noah's family. And then the angels do this again. They come down and they do this again. And God's like, you can't keep doing that. And so God throws them into the chains of gloomy darkness. That's what he says in 2 Peter and Jude. Of course, the most famous giant is Goliath. 1 Samuel 17:4, there came out of the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of his coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. Huge. And we will note, that the Israelites did not drive the Anakim from Gath. In fact, the Israelites very specifically killed all of them except in Philistia. There was none of the Anakim left in the land of the people of Israel, only in Gaza and Gath and in Ashdod, then some remain. And then lo and behold, here comes Goliath of Gath, and he's this giant dude. What are we supposed to think here? Now, 1 Chronicles 24-8, we're not going to read it. The people of Israel later seem to, as far as we can tell, kill them all. Eventually, after David becomes king, David, of course, a mighty man of war, he and his mighty men, David has his own mighty men, his own warriors and fighters. By all accounts, it seems to be that they end up eliminating all of these from Israel. What's the point? There is a point. Not only in talking about the Anakim, but talking about entering the land of Canaan. Israel, who were slaves in Egypt, they come out of the land of Egypt, they wander around for 40 years. How did they get swords? You ever thought about that? How did the Israelites get swords? How did they get shields? How did they get weapons at all? They must have made them in the wilderness. Maybe they stole them. We're not really told, because it's kind of beside the point. Did they develop metallurgy? Did they learn metallurgy in Egypt? Did they develop that in the wilderness for 40 years? Maybe. We're not told. Did they develop the ability to smelt swords and shields and bows and all of these things? It kind of doesn't matter, because the point was always going to be that God would give them victory. Over the Anakim, great and tall, over the Rephaim, super huge dudes, over the land of the inhabitants of the land who form all these coalitions against Israel, God was going to give them victory regardless. It wasn't about how good Israel was. It was never about how strong Israel was. Deuteronomy 9:1, Hear, O Israel, you are to cross over the Jordan today to go and to dispossess the nations that are greater and mightier than you. They're fortified up to heaven, a people great and tall, the sons of the Anakim, whom you know, and all of you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak? Who can stand? Well, not you, because they're greater and mightier than you. Except it doesn't matter. Because know therefore today that he who goes before you As a consuming fire is the Lord your God. He will destroy them and subdue them. He will subdue them before you. So you shall drive them out and make them perish quickly, as the Lord has promised you. It didn't matter where Israel got their weapons. Were they good at smelting? Were they good at metallurgy? Did they steal them? Did they acquire them? It doesn't matter, because God was going to give them victory. The cities that they were going to fight against, fortified, great and tall. The sons of Anak in the land, mighty. Who can stand against the sons of Anak? Well, you know who can? Yahweh. And he promised that he would give them victory. Over and over, one of the main points in God's dealings with the Israelites is that God, not the people, not Israel, God provided the victory and strength. And we see that right away when Achan takes the devoted things and God withdraws his blessing from Israel. The first battle they have in Ai, they lose. That's what should have happened over and over and over. They should have lost. And when God withdrew his blessing, they did. But when God restored his blessing, when God returned to providing them victory, God tells Joshua over and over again. This will be our main point of the sermon next week. God tells them over and over, be strong and courageous, because I will give you victory. This is still true today. Now, we're not conquering other nations. We're not going off to war. This is not something that God is expecting us to do like the Crusades. But this is still true, that your fight against Satan, it's not about you. It's not about how good you are or how strong you are. Your ability to endure persecution, your ability to stand up for what's right, your ability to have faith, we talked about in our Bible class this morning. It's not about how good you are, it's about how awesome God is. 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord that it should leave me. Whatever this thorn in the flesh that Paul had, we don't know. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And of course, we think about the story of Gideon. Gideon gathers these men. He's going to be the judge in Israel. He's going to give Israel success. God says, you got too many men. You can't have that many men. And through a series of eliminations, Gideon ends up with 300 men. Oh, okay, now we're good. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, I am content with weakness, insult, hardship, persecution, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Why? Not because it's not about me. Because God is the one who gives us victory. 1 Corinthians 1:21, this will be our last verse. For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach. Not talking about physical strength here, but intellectual strength or earthly wisdom. It pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. Jews demand signs, Greek demands wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. A stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles, but to those who are called Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Stop relying on yourself. It's not about you, and it never has been. God is the one who gives victory. God is the one who can enable you to overcome temptation and sin. He can enable you to overcome difficult situations in your family. He can enable you to overcome difficult health things. He can enable you to overcome your own worst tendencies. He is the one who gives you strength. It's never been about us. It's always been about him. As we offer the invitation, Zion's call sweetly rings over land and sea. Of course, for the Israelites, Zion's call was, we're going to go into the land of Canaan, right? They're going to go over into the land. They're going to possess it. They're going to conquer it. They're going to drive out the inhabitants, and they are going to establish this land that God gave to them. That was their call, Zion's call. For us, bidding us to look to realms above. He still wants to give you victory, right? He still wants to give you ultimate success over the forces arrayed against us. It's not going to look like earthly battle, But it is a war nonetheless, and he still wants you to win. So we offer the invitation, if you're struggling, if you're spiritually ailing, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to overcome, rely on God's strength. And if we can help you do that, let us do that. Come while we stand and sing.